Thank you for tuning in to episode 3 of Mr. Wright, the podcast for fiction writers. I'm your host, Taylor Morrison. Today's episode is going to be about outlining, just because I know that a lot of people have a hard time with outlining, and a lot of people spend a long time on outlining, but this is also just the beginner part of it. So right now this episode is going to be more about the outlining from the point of view of someone who's never done an outline before. So pretty much the difference between a plotter, a pantser, and a planter is a plotter outlines. They have to plan out their entire book before they can write it. And a pantser is someone who writes by the seat of their pants. Pretty much they just kind of go for it. They have an idea of where they want the story to go, and they just go from there. And then a planter is a combo of the two. They write an outline, and then they kind of just use it as a loose guideline. They don't sit and strictly stick to it. I feel like that's what I am. Me as a writer, I like to kind of be flexible with how I write. So the pros and cons of writing an outline, because a lot of writers have hatred for outlines. They don't really like to write them at all. They actually think that they're stupid, which I don't agree with. I think outlining or doing whatever you can to get your story written is perfectly fine. I don't care if you have to sit there and do 10 jumping jacks before you can sit down and write. That's just, if that's something you need to do, that's something you need to do. But the pros are they help you visualize the big picture. They help you figure out the overall idea of where you want your story to go. It helps you keep your story on track, so you don't get bogged down with like going this way and that, especially if you have a really complicated narrative. If you have a very complicated story, you want to plan something out before you get into it, and so you don't get confused. It logged which scenes go where, so you can visualize it. So again, part of the keeping the story on track and seeing the big picture. It tells you what scenes go where, and you can decide whether or not you want to move them around. It clearly presents character arcs, so you can see exactly how your character progresses throughout the story, because a lot of people have a hard time with that too, and we're going to talk about that at a later date, characterization and different things that you can do for characters. And it acts as a guide to ease writer's block when you're stuck. That one I don't exactly agree with, just because I know that if you're going to have writer's block while writing, you're going to have writer's block while doing the outline as well, just because usually writer's block comes from writing yourself into a corner, or you're not researched enough, or you don't know your characters that well. So if you're going to start writer's block while you're 30,000 words in, you're going to have writer's block when you're only 2 paragraphs in writing the outline. So I don't really think it helps with writer's block. It doesn't for me anyway. I feel like for me it doesn't help. I tend to get writer's block no matter where I am in the story, outlining or not. Clarifies the middle to avoid the muddle. That's where a lot of people get stuck in the middle. They have an idea of where to start and where to end, but then they don't really understand where to do in the middle. And outlining is that's actually what I think is the most common thing that outlining is used for, is to figure out where the story is going from the beginning to the end. So you have an idea of what you want to do with each scene. Now this is where some of the cons come in. Some people, again, like Stephen King, doesn't believe in outlining, or J.K. Rowling is a huge outliner. She does like a more in-depth outline. She does a crazy in-depth outline, but that's not the point. So the cons are, it can create a stilted narrative. I guess it can cause you to be like, this happened, then this happened, then this happens, then this happens, and it just kind of goes in a line. I know I'm very guilty of doing stuff like that. I tend to write things, and I don't tend to go off from there. And sometimes when you're writing, something can happen and you didn't even know that was going to happen until you're writing the descriptions and stuff. If followed too closely, you can feel formulaic. That's again where planters have a little bit more of an advantage, is where you don't really follow the outline too strictly. So yeah, if you follow your outline exactly the way you wrote it and you don't change anything about it, then yeah, it can feel very formulaic. It can be stilted. It can cause you to not realize that you're writing something very boring, I guess, because your outline is so dumbed down that when you finally do write out the whole thing, you can end up not putting in as much detail as you would like to. It's may lead to more showing rather than telling in the actual writing. Yeah, okay. And then the last one is characters may seem to make inauthentic choices solely based on plot points instead of natural results from narrative action. That one's me as well too. You try to think so hard about, well, all right, the next part of the narrative is this, so they have to do this to get that going. And then, but instead of just having your character choose how that they react to things, because an outline makes you write down things the way you want them to happen, and when you're writing, your characters sometimes take over. So again, that's where planters have a little bit more of a advantage. But if you're a plotter, I mean, as long as you try to avoid sticking to your outline exactly, even if you have to go back and fix the outline, if you realize something's happened, you can go back and rewrite your entire outline. As long as you do something like that, I don't see the problem. Now, there are 4 different types of outlining, and different outlinings can help with different things. So, like a synopsis outline is the first one. This involves the creation of a short document, usually 1 or 2 pages long, that gives you the rough idea of the novel's structure. Yeah, that one is where you just write out exactly what you think happens in the book. It's like a description of the book, of what you want to happen, point A, point B, and point C. And then everything else, it's not super detailed. You just kind of go with it. It's got the major stuff in there, and then everything else you put in later when you actually write. An in-depth outline, this is the one that J.K. Rowling uses. This is a more involved outline that usually involves writing chapter summaries and outlining the different scenes within these chapters. This is more comprehensive and can take a lot more time. However, some writers swear by this method. Some in-depth outlines can almost be mini novels themselves, hitting around 10,000 words. Yeah, that's where you pretty much write the book, your first draft, as an outline. A lot of pantsers tend to do this one just because they don't think they're outlining, they just think they're writing, which is true. I mean, they are just writing, but it turns out that your first draft is way shorter than what you actually wanted it to be, and that's because you were outlining and you didn't even realize it. The snowflake method. The snowflake method. This method was created by Arthur Randy Ingebrigtsen and begins with a 1-sentence summary of the story. Yeah, you do a 1-sentence story, and then you build up from there. So you go, it was snowing in Harlem. Then require you to build that sentence into a paragraph, and then that paragraph into 4 paragraphs, and so on. And then you pretty much keep going until you've stretched it out into a complete plot. This one I actually think is really fun. I do it as an exercise. If I think that my story's getting a little weird or stilted or isn't going anywhere, I try to use the snowflake method in the middle of writing just to get myself more of an idea. And sometimes it can give you more ideas to do it that way. And I actually think that one's really fun. So I think everyone should at least try that one, even if they just do it as a writing exercise. And then the bookend method. This method is for writers who prefer to leave some things to chance. It involves plotting the start and end of the story as well as each of the main characters, but nothing more. This method is usually recommended for writers who already have a strong grasp of the characters and the kind of story they want to tell. So it says, what is the main contract of the story? You must involve the promises you made to your reader by the end of the novel. What sort of time pressure is working on your characters? What is at stake for the protagonist of the novel? Does the pressure on the main character grow more intense as the story progresses? So yeah, the bookend method is you write the beginning and the end, and then you answer those questions. So, from what I've learned and what you have learned about outlining is that it can be very helpful. It can help you get things put together and keep your brain a little bit more organized. Sometimes it can cause issues with being too stilted and being too hyper-focused on the actual outline itself. So, but it's, again, no writing advice is perfect for everybody. I myself prefer to outline, but you might not. You might prefer to write out the entire 50,000 words and then go back and edit it, which, I mean, that's fine if you want to do it that way. Outlining, for me, helps me keep my brain from spilling out onto the table and then not going anywhere with it. I have been known to write 30,000 words of a book that absolutely went nowhere. I was on chapter like 18, and the main plot of the story still hadn't even happened. And that's just the way my brain works. It's very frazzled. It goes all over the place. And I think that sitting there and writing out exactly how I want to do it, when I want to do it, how I want to do it, is the best way for me to do it. And also, for people who want a little bit more of an in-depth summary of their novel, there's this thing called the Master Outline. It takes the premises of Hunger Games, Twilight, and Harry Potter. I know a lot of people don't think Twilight is very good, but that's not the point. It follows a structure. And that structure is the same structure that Hunger Games and Harry Potter also follow. And if you want to give that one a try, just Google Master Outline. I'll even put the link in the description of this video. That it breaks down those books and what they have in common and gives you an overall idea of how to write your book. And it does follow, I think, the hero's journey storyline, which if you're writing something like that, it would work out very well. Or you can go in and edit it the way you want to. But anyway, that's all I have for today. If you want to reach me, you can email me at taylormorrisonwriter@gmail.com. I also have a Patreon, and I'm now on Google Play and iTunes if you want to give me a listen on there. If you have any other questions or you want to follow me on Tumblr, I'm Mr. Wright at mrwright.tumblr.com. Anyway, I will see you next time. Bye.